All present. Sorry, Ken. You're good?
Good now.
Yep. So we're going to take a roll call, starting from the my left and come across. Joe, over here. Hi. Let's see. Eric. Present. Steve Anderson, you present? Yes. This is Brian Cleary, I'm present. Brett Boyer, you present? Yeah. Mike Newcott here. And Frank O'Connell here. Is anybody online who is voting or non-voting member?
The only person online right now is Bob Cole.
Okay, is Chris not joined yet?
Not yet.
Okay, well, given that the role that we have, I confirm a quorum. So let's move on to the next order of business, pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of the United States, to the republic thanks. Thank you. I'm gonna take a call for conflicts. Any conflicts of interest to be declared? Any conflict of interest to be declared on any of the matters of the agenda? I see no conflicts. We'll move to the next item, opening remarks from the chairman. These will be brief. You know, in prior meetings, this would be, I think, our fourth or fifth meeting so far of the new board. I tried to keep a little looser format just to learn how we flow and see if we could get coalesce around an agenda for meetings. Seem to have done that. You guys didn't disappoint. People were pretty vocal about their likes and dislikes. So what I've done with this meeting is put together a much tighter agenda on things that are more short term. And the goal here is to try and move through them, but also leave a good amount of time for people to discuss. Or as a suggestion was made to me by a member of the airport community, they would like to have some input before the board decides things on particular subjects. And I've tried to allow for that here where it makes sense on some of our main topics. So let's get into it. If on item 6 on the agenda is a consent agenda, I got to explain what this is. It basically you can group things together, make one motion to get a couple of things done at the same time where there's no dispute about any of them. I have circulated the airport minutes from the outstanding prior 4 meetings. I will move to approve those en masse for the February 15th, February 23rd, March 8th, and April 19th meetings. To the degree to which anybody has any edits to propose or anything like that, I would call it out, take it out of the consent agenda, but act on the remaining ones on one motion under the consent agenda. Do I make a motion to approve all 4 of the referenced meeting minutes from the past meetings? Do I have a second?
Second.
Call for discussion. I hear no discussion. I'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
It appears the ayes have it. Are there any nays? There are no nays. The action item passes. Agenda item 7, we have a report on airport activities update from our interim airport director, Bill Cummings. Bill, if you don't mind just enlightening us.
We're getting ready for summer. Corey is here from our new engineering. Just a quick update on our work project.
Hi, Corey.
Hi.
Good evening.
Corey Safer with Ardura. I would just go through the projects. I assume that you get this and just talk through the ones that have changed, I guess, since we last spoke, if that works.
Sure.
Because a lot of these they're like the taxiway D North Phase 2 construction. There's been no changes in the status of that project, and it's still pending, waiting completion. All the physical construction is done. There is just waiting decisions to be actually closed out. The Coeur d'Alene electrical improvement project is still on hold construction, waiting for parts and pieces to be delivered. We anticipate that it'll start in August. The SRE building and admin building is a task that needs to be closed. It was a design only project and we are just going to close out the design of it. By the end of this week is what my target is. The SRE building, oops, that's written wrong, but anyway, the next project is the construction project. They started construction in mid-April. They have been excavating footings. TML Construction is our contractor and they're doing the column footings and the floor footings, and we should see by probably over the next month all of the columns done. I think they were anticipating by mid-June with the wall foundations and stuff like that. We should start seeing this vertical construction middle of June is what it sounds like. The runway 624 rehab design only project. Most of the items in this project are closed because it was just designed and we just need to close it out. After I get all my fees from my sub-consultants and stuff, most of our work is done. And we're waiting a grant for the actual construction phase of that project, which we anticipate in the mid-July. Taxiway and pavement maintenance project. The update on that is that the county awarded the contract to Road Products Inc. over the past month. They were informed that they will be getting the contract once the county gets signed and approved. They can make a grant agreement. Then we'll extend the agreement onto the contractor, which is Road Products. Let's see here. Taxiway Charlie extension and to runway 6 project, but this is just a kickoff to extending the taxiway Foxtrot on the south side of 624 to the runway 6 end. We had a design kickoff meeting with the FAA over the past month, and then also with the FAA where they have the facilities. The Malzars are located, which are approach lights that are on the west end of that runway. And there's some relocation of the Malzars are located incorrect. So we've been meeting with the FAA that would, since it's an FAA owned facility, what we'll do is swap with the airport lights and the Malzar lights and put them in at the correct location. But the status of that is we're just starting the scope of work and getting approvals with the FAA for the engineering piece, and then we'll go out for, or the airport will go out for an independent fee estimate to check our costs and hours, make sure that they're fair and reasonable. And I guess the first couple things on that we would be doing over the course of the next couple months would be surveying and getting our geotechnical testing for the location of that taxiway. And then the next one is an environmental assessment. And we haven't really done any formal moving forward with environmental assessment. It's more that the county and Ardura and the FAA need to talk about what items need to be included in an upcoming or future environmental assessment, which would include commercial service, air traffic control tower, and then land acquisition to the north. And if that is an upcoming project, then we'll get going towards scoping and that sort of thing in the future. And that is about all I have for, in a nutshell.
Any questions from the board? Thank you.
Just I have a question, if I may. I'm new here and I've been on board. Who are you? What is Ardura? And just quickly, just go, I have this project, this project. I know about the taxiway project, but what other building projects do you have going on?
So I'm Corey Sickford, and Ardura, I work for Ardura, which is an engineering consultant, local in Hayden or in Coeur d'Alene. We have been selected for a 5-year selection to do the engineering for the FAA sort of projects at the Coeur d'Alene Airport. So the projects that we're currently working on here,
So could I interrupt here? I'm sorry, if you are new, typically we wait for public comment. I've allowed just the initial, maybe you could chat after the meeting. We have a lot to go through. I don't mean to be rude to you, but we got a full agenda, so I apologize to have to cut you off, but I do want to move to the next one. I appreciate your interest.
So I had a couple of questions, Steve. So it looks like the grant offer has been pushed back a month, is that correct? Because it shows June here, and you said mid-July.
oh, I may have misspoke myself. Yes,
So is it-
Gary Gates has told us that it is, who is our FAA project manager, to start looking for it in June. So hopefully it will actually be signed, you know, the paperwork goes back and forth between the two by mid-July.
Okay, and then the environmental, the environmental assessment is starting on that contingent upon having someone apply for commercial service here, or is that something? So what are we doing the environmental assessment for?
We're not even sure we're doing the environmental assessment quite yet, but that might be a good question for Phil.
So there's a couple things tied to that. We're scheduled to initiate conversation with Myers on the first purchase, which would be on our north boundary and west of Ramsey Road.
Okay,
We have to have the environmental assessment for that purchase. We also need it for future commercial service, and that's gonna happen up north. We also need to have it for a placement of a tower. So we're trying to use that environmental assessment to try and cover all three of these things. So we have it done and ready to go, rather than wait till somebody knocking on the door, and then we have to do it later. Because it's an 18 to 24 month process. And if we're gonna buy the land anyway, we need to get that process going.
so, so if we're not sure about the tower, or we're not sure about commercial service, don't you have to be specific about all of the items that you would be writing the assessment for?
The basis on which we're doing the initial request for environmental assessment, we're scheduled to do that property purchase. I believe was it 25 or 26, Corey? I think it's 25.
I think it was 25 for the. Yeah.
So by the time we get through that process, we're gonna be at that purchase threshold. So we're gonna have to complete anyway. We're just trying to cover as many things as we can on the federal nickel while we're doing this. If we have to do it anyway to buy the property.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else have questions? Right?
Yeah, no, I was a categorical exclusion entering that,
Excuse me?
categorical exclusion, how does that enter into that process?
You're talking on the miscellaneous things down below.
Correct.
The categorical exclusion was we were going to try and not do the full environmental assessment on the property. We hadn't actually. It was for developing the northeast area, so where the terminal sits, the air traffic control out tower, and then that property. We hadn't actually made it down the path to getting to talking to the FAA because we were waiting on the air traffic control tower city and the FAA to get on board with that first. So none of this is just a task that's out there that hasn't been vetted yet or complete yet. It was just like one of the tasks that we were supposed to be doing once it got to that point.
Any other questions? Is this a phase one environmental assessment? Is that what the nature of it is? Or is it phase two?
I don't think we haven't really scoped it yet, so it
Okay.
may just
That'll all depend on what the FAA comes back with.
requires.
Right, any other questions on this item? Hearing none, I'll close out item 7 on the agenda. We'll go to number 8. This is a report as per request of Portland Airport Association. Mr. Craviotto.
Yeah,
It's
my
gonna
name
give
is
us a
Eric
quick update.
Craviotto, I'm president of Portland Airport Association. We'd like to thank you guys for doing all your hard work over here on the advisory board, because I know it takes time and patience and all that kind of stuff, so we appreciate you guys. Also, we had a Portland Airport Association last night, which was a good, really good presentation by a gentleman that knows something about outer space junk. And then we had one by Mike and Kate for AWAS and also landing fees. So that was good, and we're trying to get we're trying to get a presentation every month for somebody at the airport to put on a presentation to our association, so we know what's going on around the airport and the users and owners and hangar owners of the airport. So we'll hopefully have people come up and present interesting things, which we did this last meeting. And I would also like to thank the Hagedorn Corporation, Sandcraft, and No Limits for their hospitality to our association. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Any questions? After hearing none, I'm moving to item 9, which is a report on airport gate access subject matter from Mike and Possible. Mike, could you take it away?
Take it away.
Thanks.
Okay, so I met with Phil Anthony, who's the gentleman who oversees the design and the maintenance of the gate system here at the airport. And Gaston was also at the meeting that we held. It was on March 29th. We discussed current and future system design and operation. I don't know if all of you are aware, maybe some of you, how this system operates. I'm a retired electrical engineer. I guess, and you never really retire if you're an electrical engineer, but still, that's my background in wireless data systems specifically. So it's something I'm very familiar with. And I'll first say that I was very impressed with the system that is in place. And I understand Anthony, the gentleman, I don't know his last name, I apologize. You got to start giving cards out to these people. So we did an overview of the system. What happens is at each gate, there is a radio modem, and they're all functioning in parallel. So they will go back to upon a gate entry request, currently with a Fox card. The request goes back to a head end, which is out at the fire station, and it queries the database to find out who we want to let in and who we don't. And then it goes back and it gives an authorization by a backlink to the gate. And that's why sometimes you'll see a pause between the time you swipe your card. There's a little pause. Well, that's because it's got to go to that location and back again to the gate, and then it grants access to the gate. So took a look at the system. There's currently a design that's in process for expanding the system. There's I think currently there are about 1,000 access codes that are entered into the system. We discussed maybe best placement for the equipment there for getting good signal quality back to the location, so you don't wind up swiping your card and then it doesn't know you're there. So it looks good. I shared user concerns regarding access for contractors, family members, etc. And so the easiest way to implement that would be to have a secondary access capability, which would be going back in time to the keypads. And so discussed that with Phil on a couple of different occasions, and our 139 class 4 status would permit use of access codes through a keypad. You start ratcheting up to class 3, class 2, class 1, and then maybe we can't do that anymore. But for the time being, it appears that we could do that. So we arrived at the solution of adding keypads to select gate locations. And I don't know specifically what those gate locations would be. I have some ideas, but I'm leaving that up to Phil and the guys to fill it in. And also Gaston came from Tehachapi Airport, and he said that they had a very similar access to that airport with, I believe codes and prox cards.
You essentially have a PIN number associated.
So what we discussed was that for every keypad access that's issued, there has to be an riding prox card that would permit those key codes to that particular prox card. So it appears that it's doable. Phil stated that he could find the funds to purchase the additional hardware. I don't think that's a big deal. It's not an incredible amount of money to put keypads on there. We talked about stabbing on a NEMA box next to the current prox card box, and then that's kind of like what you see out at Cessna. So I believe that Phil gave Anthony, the system maintainer and designer, the permission to contact the supplier to find out what it would take. We want to keep everything brand specific, so you don't want to hodgepodge somebody else's keypad with whatever we've got for prox card readers. I talked to Phil after that meeting and just was kind of trying to get an idea of when this might be implemented. He suggested we could be looking at a final install by the end of June. I don't know if that's changed. I don't know if what the parts, if you can get a hold of what you need to get a hold of to make this all happen. Supply chain issues, maybe.
We're working on the quotes from the different companies, and to clarify, Mike and I talked about adding the keypads and stuff, and with Gaspin's background and experience at his previous airport, the newer systems that can actually go into the future rather than trying to piece stuff together. It's a combination system with a keypad and a prox card, and as Mike said, the new prox card will have a PIN number. So you don't have to call the airport to get what the new code is for that month. So when these are changed, you'll have a keypad, you'll have a prox card as well. So you swipe your card, you go into your hangar, and your son shows up and he wants to come to the hangar. You simply give him the PIN number assigned to your card, he punches it in the keypad and he gets in. So it eliminates a lot of work for us, eliminates a lot of hassle for you. And I believe the investment, we're gonna be somewhere, depending on how far we get into the system to initiate, we're gonna be $200,000 to $300,000. We've got, we have money coming from purchasing right away from the city and also from the sale of property to the fishing game. Those type of things are approvable for the expenditure of that money, because this money is protected by the FAA. So we can spend it on approvable things, and things like the key access and fencing are approvable under the FAA guidelines. So right now, we're still waiting on cost estimates. We have to get 3 estimates from 3 different companies. And once we get to that point, we're still working on the money. I'm not sure we can have it by the end of June. That's kind of our goal. But we're, subject to, I'll pass the government. So we're working on it.
Well, thank you for filling in on that, Phil, and that's all I have, Brian.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions or discussion on that? Hearing none, we're gonna move to our first kind of big item for tonight is report and recommendations on AWOS. Mike Kincaid has graciously put together a video for us on this. He's going to play, that will be the report side. And he may have recommendations at the end that he wants to share. And after that, I would open it up to anybody in the audience who wants to add public comment specific to this item. Don't wander off to every other subject, but AWOS. And then I think I would open it up for questions, discussion among the group before we formulate, if we formulate a motion on it, which is a little out of order, but I think it would be best to do it this way. So Mike, without further ado, please, you have the floor and
Thank you.
get play.
Real quick, Andrew, I was asked to prepare a brief discussion on AWOS, and we tried to do a PowerPoint that crashed between the county and here and me. So put it on YouTube, and I think that actually could work better. Lots of input over the years from pilots and made it very basic, that even no non-pilots can understand. If you can keep your questions and insults to the end, that's great. Thank you.
Brian, could you turn down the lights over there? They're right behind you.
Oh, right here.
AWAS is the automated weather observing system. It's the center. You can see over the picture. When they pick up weather data, I can turn to a frequency 135.075 here at Fort Lane on aircraft radio. Call 208-772-8215 and get information collected by those sensors on the current weather. In prior years, the pilot could also tune their radio to area frequency and learn critical safety issues like low runway, tower operation, and a change in radio frequencies. A previous airport director said the equipment was updated, upgraded, and that upgrade took away the capability to add these announcements to our AWACS. Consider the consequences of entering the traffic pattern, old aircraft, the helicopters, the big jets, the firefighters, flying at various altitudes at a wide range of speeds and communicating on different radio frequencies. What could possibly go wrong? The alternative we were directed to are no dams. That's unacceptable. Notice the air missions were a basic form of the telegraph started around 1850. They look like telegraphs. It hasn't changed much since it came to aviation in the 1950s. What's wrong with them? Well, according to the former chairman of NTSB, they're just a bunch of garbage that nobody pays attention to. People who fly a lot just don't check them, said former Senator Dean Inhofe, who's also a pilot. Former FAA designated pilot examiner, current instructor. I agree with both of those gentlemen. There is no requirement how long before flight notice must be checked. Be checking tonight. You're good for a flight tomorrow by regulation. So what happens if there's closed runway or a tower pocket? You don't know the new frequency. Could be a problem now. Last year at our airport, nodems for temporary tower were added as short as a minute before takeoff back and one was 2 minutes after. So how's the guy flying in to the airport supposed to know that? Mid-flight. What nodems look like? And the system does crash. Last year it failed and cut down aviation and the airline industry for good. If they estimate to be 2 years for current issues, 6 and 10 years for the nodem system modernized. We have everything from vintage aircraft with very basic panels and radio to big jets with everything you can stuff in a panel coming in the quarter line, and both of them screw up. Some reason even the jets, you think they have everything in a whiz bang panel, and they don't know about the new temporary tower. You come in and blend and have some very, very close calls. Fortunately, got some good folks here that will call on the radio and intervene and say, hey, there's a temporary tower, here's a frequency, kind of help both these categories aircraft out. But let's take a flight here, see how this works out. So pick a plane, got the carbon cut here, right, we got a 172, your choice. Our mission today, we're going to take off, head to the south and fly over beautiful Lake Coeur d'Alene. So we go to the beginning of the runway here and we dial up to ALS frequency 135.075 and we listen for weather information. If there was new information like a tower effect or a new frequency, this is when it would have been in previous years. Come up on our ALS, we would know that. Now all we got is weather. So we take off to the south, do a nice flight down Lake Coeur d'Alene. Some of the seaplane pilots started this a few years ago where we have a regular cockpit. We recommend you fly it over the lake, which is stay on the right side, both going south and coming back north, stay on the right side of the lake. So because of the Brooks seaplane mid-air crash, 3 people were killed. We also report, we communicate on 122.8 and get position reports. Talk to other aircraft. This is coming over beautiful Beauty Bay as we're making our way home, and we're going to report our position over the north end of Lake Coeur d'Alene. This is where we would have dialed up our ALOS a little bit before this and got the weather, and if we still had notifications, we would have learned if there's a temporary tower or a new radio frequency. We're going to give a position report over Hayden Lake, and at that point we look for traffic, and oh my goodness, here is a giant CL-415 water bomber coming right at us. So we dive out of the way and we utter something under our breath about this guy can keep doing. Not talking on radio, going to an airport. So we head to our airport ourselves and we come in for landing. Things seem to be going great. And then this happened. You don't get much closer than that without getting killed. And I think pilots in this room and pilots you'll meet at Garland Airport will tell you that happens way too often. Just about everybody I talk to has had at least one close call at Garland Airport. One of the pilots, in this case, wasn't aware of the temporary tower, in fact, of the new radio frequency. Why? Because there was no notice on our AWOS. The pilot didn't receive notice by notice for various reasons. This is what a midair looks like. This happened last year in Dallas, Texas. Nothing to do with AWOS, but this shows what happens in a midair. And if not for the reactions by quick thinking pilots over the past few years here, this very well could have happened multiple times at our airport. Someone said just the other day, it's not if, it's when it will happen here. If we don't get this AWOS system fixed. What could possibly go wrong? Well, here you go, right to the house. Very close neighborhood and aging to the airport. How can we make it better, safer, and easier? Going to play your recording here of an AWOS, and you have to excuse the reverberation. We really get a lot of feedback, but you kind of get the idea. You listen closely. This one has an announcement at the end. Okay, so the announcement at the end was added to the AWOS weather broadcast by the airport manager up in Sandpoint. He didn't have a temporary tower report, but it was talking about the traffic pattern in the calm wind runway. That's pretty important here at Coeur d'Alene too. We have a traffic pattern. Everything is left traffic except runway 2, and that's right traffic. So runway 2, if there's a runway 2-0, they just go off the direction. A couple years ago, a Kodiak was coming in, doing everything right. The green arrows show the proper way to end the pattern. Red is bad. Blue is good on the big runways. He comes in, making a left downwind approach to 2-0. And all of a sudden, out of the west, comes a fully loaded citation jet. And he's decided he's going to make left traffic for 2. And there would have been a mid-air or midfield collision right in front of transector, most likely, but multiple fatalities between the 2 aircraft and maybe the transector. And yes, there is a regulation that says you can't do that. You got to do the pattern entry to publish. However, people ignore that all the time, unfortunately. This is where a broadcast would help. Legal ramifications. Can the county be sued? Well, according to the case law, yes, the county can be held liable. Question comes up, can individuals such as advisory board members, airport personnel, county commissioners, if they know the problem and they don't take reasonable means to fix it, can they be sued? That's something you need to talk to your attorney about. There is an FAA policy that says the safe operation of the airport and the airway system is of the highest aviation priorities. So we need to make sure that's happening at Coeur d'Alene Airport. AWOS is one way to see that does happen. 88% of all airports own their own AWOS and can add whatever announcements they want. The cheapest way to get around AWOS is to have the FAA sign it over for free. Just a paperwork issue. The most expensive option is to buy an AWOS from an FAA approved vendor. Cost is about $100,000 installed, and the FAA will give a grant for 95% of that. I believe the state will kick in for half of that 5%. But saving lives for $5,000 is a bargain. Why we wouldn't want to do this? Again, there's a little bit of maintenance cost annually with that. The Sandpoint Airport, the manager up there said he budgets $1,200 a year for the AWOS. He didn't even use that last year, so it's not a high maintenance item. Let's do all we can to prevent another accident due to the lack of proper communication. The AWOS is number 1 on the list to make sure we do communicate here. Thank you, and help keep the Coeur d'Alene Airport safe.
Brian, if you could get the lights.
landing fees, let's bring them back to earth at the Coeur d'Alene Airport.
So,
The FAA authorizes landing fees at U.S. airports, so does the state of Idaho, and so does BP.
click on it, it will stop, yeah. So, thank you, Mike, and, I think, Phil, did you have any comments, or, you know, you can save them or whatever, I don't know if you had any thoughts that you want to share in addition to that.
Well, first off, I have to say, we need to agree to disagree. Mike and I have had this discussion before. And some of my calculations, my conversations with Dave Schuck, I've known Dave for years, differ from what the information Mike said. However, that being said, I'm and have always been an advocate of augmented AWAS. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. When I started in aviation in Alaska, every AWAS in Alaska was augmentable. I thought they all were. I get down here, we're still doing weather manual. 3 years after I got here, they come in and put an AWAS in. Where's the microphone? How do we augment it? Oh, we don't do that, we don't do that over 48. Why not? It took me 3 years to get the FAA to start a pilot program for augmenting AWASs in the lower 48. It started right here at Coeur d'Alene. I was one to institute that. Now, I understand the problems the FAA had. Pilots abused it, airports abused it, airport operators did not do their job. We didn't put notice on there, and that's part of the fallacy of the whole AWAS. Guys would close the runway, and they wouldn't put the closure on there. Pilots are supposed to check before they fly. I don't care if it's a day before or 10 minutes before. Pilots are responsible to check before they fly for all the current notice and weather at their airport. The AWAS is not an official source of notice, never has been, never will be. Okay. The AWAS is meant for advisory. Yes, closed runways, open runways. What the fiasco you guys had last year, and I was retired for 2 years, and I got phone calls last summer about the fiasco with the Forest Service temporary tower. Okay. So that being said, I believe in trying to take over the AWAS. Okay. It's kind of free, but government doesn't do anything quick. If I called them tomorrow and said we want to take over the AWAS in Coeur d'Alene, it's going to be 3 months before they can transport it. I'm very talkative about this. They could probably speed that up, yes, but generically, the government isn't real quick about getting rid of anything. That being said, we end up with the AWAS. Our AWAS is a little different than Sandpoint's, and I talked to Dave. So when they augment their AWAS, their computer is at the AWAS equipment down on the end of the runway. It's not in their office. So they have to go down, make sure the building's shoveled out, get in the building and do the augmentation out there at the site. That might be convenient for them, but it's not convenient for us, the 2 runways and all the activity we have. That's not an excuse. I'm trying to explain the difference in it. Our computer sits, actually it's in the garage here. The computer's head end is over here. And the equipment's out at the site. It's down on runway 6. One of the things we need to understand the cost of once they give it to us. We don't have the right to access federal comm line. It's called a Navy line. That's how this computer talks to the equipment. So one of the things we need to look at is the cost involved in, and I wouldn't put it here. We take it over at whatever point. I would choose to have, if we could afford it, have fiber optic run from the equipment to the fire station, so I can get it there easier than I can get it here. But that has to be done. Okay, there's a cost associated with that. Now, in my talking to Dave Schuck 3 weeks ago, and I have the name of his contractor that they have to contract to certify. Monthlies have to be done, and quarterlies have to be done, and they have to maintain a certain certificate. Their contract is $60,000 a year per contract to maintain that AWAS. That is just the standard maintenance. Okay, the repair, if the wind indicator goes out, it's $5,000. Plus whatever her percentage is on that equipment, 10%, whatever. And her hourly rate to come in and do, because she's certified to work on it. That's a cost that they have to incur. So I said, okay, so your AWAS over the past 5 years, what's your average cost to operate your own AWAS? Well, it's a 60 grand plus their maintenance cost, so anywhere from 80 to 120,000 a year. Now, this is what Dave tells me. I can look into it from other airports, and I know other airports that have. Those are realistic costs that we're gonna have to somehow figure out how to pay for and maintain that yearly upkeep. Because we will be required to add to do the monthlies and the quarterlies of it. Something else that just recently changed that we just got noticed of here a month ago. Any nav aids that we own pappies and reels on these runways. Anytime we have an incident now, we have to parameter certify everything we own that was involved with that incident on that runway. Not a big deal for the lighting because I think 3 of us are certified to do that. But we would have to bring the contractor in to certify parameters of the AWAS at that time. That's a recent thing I didn't know about. But believe me, I think that one of the best safety tools an airport operator can have is an augmented AWAS. But they're not really free. And there are operational costs associated with it. I would like Mike to help us understand what those realized costs are to us here at Fort Lane in pursuing this. The FAA would love to hear it. However, I believe, and I just heard this comment recently, I believe the FAA may be interested in augmenting federal AWAS again. I haven't verified that again. I just found out about it. But there's a cost to it, and I think we can overcome that. That has to be paid for within the aviation committee here on the airport. The taxpayers are going to pay it. Okay. Whether that's 60,000 a year or 100,000 a year, I think that can be done. I agree with a lot of what Mike said, with the exception of, and I was running the airport at the time. Stephen didn't shut the AWAS off. The FAA came out here in August of 2017, 16 or 17. And they upgraded our AWAS, which I thought that was really going to be great. And he said, well, Cummings, we really appreciate everything you did. We should have last AWAS we're shutting down for augmentation. So what do you mean? They took the augmentation software out of our computer. In August, I believe it was 16 or 17, I can find the FAA project number. It was something that happened prior to Stevens getting here, and we were trying to fight it when he got here, trying to get a handle on this and get it back together. The FAA hasn't want to entertain augmentation of federal AWASs for at least 5-6 years that I know. Now, if there's a chance that we can get them to allow us to augment. And again, the problems were the certified people in airport operations, they need to do their due diligence. If you're gonna have an augmented AWAS and you have a hazardous condition out there, that needs to be on that AWAS. Conversely, when the condition's gone, it has to be taken up. That wasn't being done. It was like the tower thing last year. Unfortunately, the Forest Service had to depend on the FAA for their tower. And I know there's shorter controllers that have been for years. It's not much of an excuse that would happen. The FAA has never been good about issuing their own notice. I fought that for 37 years. Now, in talking to the Forest Service, what I wanted to do is what they proposed to me, and I didn't have to say anything. They want to do a contract tower, which is not FAA. They want to pay for it, and they want to run it from the fire season of the contract basically is July 10th to October 1. I said, that's great. That's what I'd love to have, but I don't want it shut down, turn on, turn on. So what they want to do with the contract tower is run it for 2-week segments. Okay, if they start on the 10th of July, they're gonna run it for at least 2 weeks before they shut it down, if there's no fire activity. And if there's no fire activity 2 days after they initiate it, it doesn't matter, they're gonna run it for 2-week segments, so we don't have this on for a day and a half, not here in the morning, here in the afternoon. I understand the frustration because of phone calls I got last year. And the Forest Service suggested that at our meeting, and I think that that's a great thing. That's gonna solve some of the problems that we had in the past. Okay. But the AWAS, it's a real contentious issue in a lot of places, and one of the liability things you get into, and Mike was alluding to, putting information out about flying around Fort Lake. No, you don't wanna go there. When you have an AWAS at your airport, you put information that pertains to your airport operation. If we're putting information about how to fly around Fort Lake, we're doing air traffic controls. We cannot legally do that. Now, if the commissioners want to hire a good attorney to keep us out of trouble, and you can convince the commissioners to put the color of the dog should be walking down the Sherman, I don't care. But if we're gonna have an AWAS, I think it should pertain to the safety of this airport, because we have enough problems here without worrying about who's flying around Fort Lake. Not that I don't think that's that is a concern, especially around here, and I know Mike, you're already right.
Well, I never talked about that, Bill. I'm not,
Well-
I was put on that flyer on the lake. That's not related.
Let's fire around, we keep talking about.
Anyone do that. I agree. I agree. I'm not arguing. I agree. We've never talked about this at the airport. That was just an example of what we did as a safety thing because of a mid-air flight. I agree with you.
I get that, but I want to be real clear about if we have an AWAS here at Fort Lake. It's strictly advisory, they're not known, and it should pertain strictly to Fort Lake Airport. I 100% would stand behind and support augmenting an AWAS.
So thank you both. Phil, I don't want to interrupt your remarks, but it sounded like you were concluding. So there's a little bit of tension there, not that that's avoided, but that's good, but I want to keep things flowing. So Mike, I don't know if you had some additional remarks, but I did want to get to, the audience on this particular topic and see if they have.
The budget Phil's talking about, that's the budget for the entire airport, the 60 to 100,000. Pinpoint's unique in that they have half of the instrument lines and half the lights that they have. So that budget you're talking about, Phil, for the entire system, light, instrument approach. 1,200 is for that. So we can talk to Dave about that, but and yes, we would never want anything about flying over the lake or land on anyone. So I agree totally with Phil. Usually about the airport. The idea on the NOTAMs, you can't check those. We don't have a way of checking those in flight coming in, especially if they are 2 minutes before.
I'll clarify that, Mike, you can't.
Okay, let me finish my sentence so you understand. We don't have a way of checking without going home flight service, but for getting a NOTAM in flight and a Piper Cub on most of the general aviation aircraft we come in here, it's really hard to do. And that's why we have the big jets and little guys coming in here on the long. And we are gonna have a minute. I agree, we do need to augment it, whatever way we can do it. We just need to accommodate it.
I agree with amazes me after being gone for 2.5 years. Nobody runs a Unicom at this airport anymore. What's wrong?
Well, I agree with that.
I mean, if it was an augmented AWAS in the Unicom, things were at least reasonably safe. We don't even have anybody monitoring and operating the Unicom.
Can you explain everybody what that is? Because probably people don't know what the Unicom is.
But Unicom, the Unicom is for here's 122.8. Someone's coming into our area to airport. And correlate Unicom with 5-6 Fox, what are your winds? But they can get a lot of information off of Unicom. Okay. But when someone calls in here to Unicom, no one's gonna answer because nobody runs a Unicom at this airport as busy as we are. I find that I find it offensive actually, with all the talent and all the people we have on this airport, and nobody runs a Unicom. I can't believe it. Especially not having.
So thank you both. And I did want to leave an opportunity on this targeted subject of paywalls for members of the public to just share their thoughts. So let's open that up. Tom.
I'd like to know what color dogs we can have in Sherman. Yeah, I guess my question is, it seems like we, both sides agree that we need to do this, so what's been done so far, or how do we move from here? For the A-ones.
Mr. Craviano.
Yeah, Phil mentioned that the possibility of augmenting this A+ that we already have, what is that a possibility, or is that?
I just heard about that, so I'm gonna be making some calls, to find out why, that was suggested.
Okay. I mean, if we can do it within the system,
Oh,
That makes sense.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can do it and the feds own it, maintain it, I'm all for it. But I wanna know where that came from, and I wanna research if that is even a remote possibility.
So we're moving forward.
Yeah, well, we've looked into different systems. I've talked to a couple of different airports, and we haven't initiated anything with FISDO yet, because I don't wanna get them too excited. But I understand, I've had talked to a couple of people in regional over in Seattle about this. And yes, it might trend, it is a trend, and there's a reason for that. Now, they've had problems on both sides of the fence with the old ones, and that's why the FAA said no more. But there's been such a push for airports who want augmented AWASs, they may be taking a look at it again, maybe that's where the comment came from. And I'd like to discuss that with regional and see if this is something they're working on. I'd like to be a test bed again. But if they're really not, then understanding what it takes for them to turn this system over to us. And I didn't think about it originally until I thought, well, we're county. And that naming line is just federal. We're not authorized to be on a federal convoy. So that is one thing we have to overcome, not insurmountable. The reason why I would put it in the fire station, because I know where all the spare conduits are, you go under the runways and the taxi range to get it over there. So all we have to do is plow it to where those are. But we did that years ago because we knew stuff like this would happen. For us to put a con line from down there along 06, you know where the glide slope is? That's where the AWAS equipment is.
Right.
For us to put our own con line from there to this office would be 3 times the cost. And I'm guessing my son's doing fiber optics. It would be 3 times the cost to put it in here as it would in the fire station. But this is where we're going, because this building is going away in 2-3 years. So that's what I would have to do and cut our cost down, but it's still a cost, yes.
We have possibilities, sorry, new guy.
Okay.
With all the construction going on the north side, is it not possibly feasible? to Possibly put this whole thing on the north side of the airport? Yes, crossing the runway is kind of an issue and all of that nonsense. But we've already got probably a good partner in Staying-Craft with everything else that's going on there. We got available again. And good opportunity, especially with customs now being over there. And just kind of possibly looking at that location as opposed to where it is now. Especially if you're going to totally revamp the system, right?
Well, you have a good point, and it's something we have thought about recently, what's cheaper? I mean, if we're gonna own it, we pick it up and move it, but then, there's costs associated with that, with upgrading it. I think we have. Believe me, it's not easy to put one of those in, you don't put it in on a weekend with your tractor auger and some cement. Sure. Because there's parameters, and this is a very expensive system, I would love to have it. But I need to understand what those costs are. Do I leave it here and run fiber optics to the fire station? Is it cheap for us to pick the whole thing up and move it to someplace on the north side where we can run fiber to our station easier and relocate the system? I need to understand what those actual costs are.
So, Bill,
Correct.
so not to cut you off, but to cut you off. Sorry. I appreciate your comment, and I think I got some Steve here. One
So
second.
we got Commissioner Matari with us here, and he's been hearing about AWAS since before he was logged in on the Board of County Commissioners. And we've all heard these discussions before. When we knew that Mike was going to give a presentation on AWAS, we asked specifically to have a recommendation from him, which he put in the form of a motion and also a resolution. And I'm sorry, Phil, I understand that was misinterpreted. It wasn't ever intended to be a resolution that would forward to the county commissioners. It was a resolution that would allow us to act on a motion here to where we could recommend something. Now, the concern that we have is that since we've been talking about this, and it was before you showed up back here again, Phil, is that we can talk it to death, but and we recognize that we don't direct you. We make recommendations to the county commissioners. Part of what Mike wanted to include in a motion was to recommend to the county commissioners that they direct you, because you've got a priority of items that you're working with. And this one may be down on the list. I mean, there's other things that may be more urgent, but a safety issue like this is very urgent to us. And so when we come to making a motion on this, it will be whether or not we recommend to the county commissioners that they direct you to focus on ways that we could augment and the costs associated with it, and all those things that you would have to bring back to them before an actual decision was made to make any additional expenditures or to change the system. So I hope that helps, because we know it's a complicated issue. There's new things that some of us have met with you before to talk about AWAS. I didn't know about this Nadine line until a week ago, and maybe that's a deal, maybe it's not. I don't know, but the point is, I don't think we're going to solve it tonight. We can answer some questions, specific questions related to this, but we're not going to get an answer. You're not going to be able to say you can do it, and we're not in a position to ask you to do it. We're here to deliver information. Yes, and I will move that based on the information that we've gotten from Mike Kincaid's presentation and other information that we've gathered over time, that we see a safety concern that we would like to have addressed by recommending to the county commissioners that they direct a focused effort by the airport director to look at augmenting the AWAS system. So that's my motion.
Second. I second.
I think we get seconds. So it's been seconded, open for discussion among the board members.
I just have one question. Was there? I actually didn't know that the Unicom was not monitored. Shame on me for not knowing that, but is there a short-term fix where someone could monitor that frequency? I mean, I know that's always a staffing issue, then. Well, holy smokes, that would be a great way to get information to people like tomorrow morning. As it relates to safety issues. That's all I have to say.
Any other discussion, questions among the group?
I had a comment to Phil, but it's not germane to what we're doing right now.
So do you want to amend that motion to add your thought?
No.
To that?
I want to keep it focused on the AWAS system.
So let's call for a vote then. If I could re-describe your motion, right, which is to, we would recommend to the county commissioners that they task the interim airport director with focusing on this AWOS issue and investigating the possibilities of augmenting our AWOS system
As expeditiously
as possible. And that's the motion. So let's call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I think the ayes, all against say no. I think the ayes have it amongst the group, so the motion passes.
You gonna do a roll call? Because I guess you just paraphrased this resolution 2023-01, didn't you?
That actually is a resolution that came from them. It's not our resolution.
Okay, just a motion.
Yeah.
Okay,
And the facsimile that was provided to give us ideas.
okay.
So having completed that item, and it is now just 6 o'clock. I want to get a sense of the board if they want to proceed to the next item on the agenda. Should they have time, or do they want to perhaps entertain tabling it to the next meeting? The next item being landing fees, which is item 11.
I guess my position is I would defer to the audience and see what the audience wants. We had an audience that sat through 2.5 hours the last time. If they're willing to spend another half hour, I think we could get at least the landing fees knocked out.
How do you folks feel?
It's only a 4-minute video.
There are no nays, but let's move forward. We'll end at 6:30, so let's move on to the next item, item 11 on the agenda. Report and recommendations on landing fees. Again, Mr. Kincaid. You have the floor, or
Okay.
press play or something.
Bill, ignore Bill and I argue, we've been doing this for 20 years, but we don't agree on safety. Okay. I'm there, please, again.
Landing fees. Let's bring them back to Earth at the Coeur d'Alene Airport. The FAA authorizes landing fees at U.S. airports. So does the state of Idaho, and so does Coos County. Last year, they made resolution 2022-31 that changed them a bit, and changed the way they are collected, but special provisions of the resolution to the airport director and board say that these fees may be reviewed annually by the staff and the advisory board for recommended changes to the board of county commissioners. Airport director may waive or allow additional items for justifiable costs. We don't want to run these airplanes away from the airport. Certainly want to encourage warbirds and air shows, vintage aircraft that they're doing payments and they do, people want to see them. And we certainly want to encourage West to continue to use our airport for training. This new 900 will be over the weight limit, current 8,000 pounds. And every time they do a touch and go, they could get charged. So they wouldn't be coming in if this wouldn't get changed. We certainly don't want to run folks off at cost of values in aviation, like the Pemberton guys would rebuild neat airplanes and train youth to become mechanics and pilots in their program. They come over here and show these neat aircraft to folks at Coeur d'Alene. Or these guys, is U.S. Forest Service and their vendors. Consider the revenue the pilot, crew, and the staff bring to the county with the purchase of fuel, lodging, food, cargoes, and supplies. And the problem is, they have been talking that Forest Service about relocating maybe someplace like Moses Lake, for example. Moses Lake, you compare the fees. This is for, let's go to the worst case scenario, DC10, the 1848, at Coeur d'Alene, and only 462 in Moses Lake. For an RJ85, 409 at Coeur d'Alene, 106 in Moses Lake. It's a big difference when you have a busy fire season with a lot of takeoff and landings during the day. I kind of want those guys here. If we have a fire in our neighborhood anyway, it would certainly be nice to have an airplane at the airport. But here are the comparable Northwest airport landing fees, and again, Coeur d'Alene is way out of range of everybody else. This is a study done by Franklin, that the weight limit should be in that 12.5 range to be competitive. And it shows again how much higher we are than other people in the region. We're at 409, look at Oregon, we're at 45. Again, Moses 100 for the RJ 85. Are we losing business? Well, if a jet wants to get fuel or drop off passengers, they have a couple options. Come to Coeur d'Alene, they can go over to Phelps Field and pay a landing fee of $2.10 for 1,000 pounds. Come to Coeur d'Alene, pay $4.40. Or you can go up to Sandpoint and pay $0. A landing fee now, for example, this is kind of a fantasy, but let's say a 737 bizjet came in here and needed a full load of fuel. That would cost them $76,000 at retail. The fuel voyage fee to the airport would be $900. And all we're doing is reducing the landing fee from $748 to $374. You can see we certainly make it up in the voyage fee. And things, hopefully they spend at the airport or in the county. Crunching the numbers. Reasonable landing fees. So need, most likely, higher net revenue to the county. These are collected by a company called Vector right now. What they do is they have software that picks up called ADSB out. I'll show you that here in a minute. And satellite tracking, radar flight plans, and flight permit data. They pick it up and put it in the system, and then they send a bill to the operator. Vector has the ability to filter out such things as vintage aircraft and special exemptions, which the airport may choose to allow. We can make changes monthly to affect changes in the landing fee schedule. And we learned this by calling them and not talking anything specific about our report, because that's that privileged information, just asking generalities and how it's collected in the system. So here's what they do. When the airplane sends out a signal, this is ADSB off display, chart, you know, has the software, and they get the tail number, they get the registered owner, look up the weights, and send them to the invoice in that. Looks something like this. Again, this is one our buddy Addison got, and they're landing here last year, $22, and he said, well, I no longer use Coeur d'Alene, I didn't know about this. Hopefully he's gonna be back this spring. Let's get this gets taken out. Our occasional glitches in landing fees. This seaplane was charged with just flying over the airport. Since the floats are not amphibious, there are no wheels in there. The cost of the straight floated non-wheel thing, if he would have landed on asphalt, suffering extensive damage to the float and maybe the rest of the airplane, would have been much more expensive than a landing fee. He had no intention of landing. The following recommendations are being made to keep our airport competitive in landing fees. Also, to encourage visitors to purchase aviation fuel, airport services, and other services and products in Coopee County, while fostering the spirit of aviation and goodwill. Airport use fee. Well, we recommend going back up to the 12,500 pounds and accessing everyone at a rate of 220 depends on the cap. Exemptions. Fee applies only to non-base aircraft. This is the current policy, no change here. Recommend that military aircraft be exempted. Why would we charge our military? We should, Coopee County supports our military, and we should want to do that at the airport. Plus, it's really cool to see an F-18 glider. Antique classic aircraft, this one built before 1955, should be exempted. Aren't that many, and they do. Again, it's a real crowd pleaser, and something we want to encourage our airport. Aircraft operating for heavy maintenance operations may be exempted. This would be something like an Empire, and this is no change to the policy. Aircraft brought to Coeur d'Alene for display, air shows, fly-in, or other special events may be exempted. So if we have a commemorative Air Force, or we have just a fun fly-in, again, the airport director should have that discretion to be exempted. Aircraft involved in charitable activities such as angel flights, animal rescue flights, or for emergency situations may be exempted. This makes common sense. The airport director may adjust airport usage fees and or exchange or other remuneration for heavy seasonal users providing essential services. So that's a lot of verbiage to say that if the U.S. Forest Service would like to do something like pay for a temporary tower operation in the summer, then the airport director should have the discretion to either lower their landing fee schedule or eliminate them entirely, because it would be such great service to have a temporary tower paid for by the Forest Service. That wraps it up. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so similar to the last presentation, Mike also put together a motion or a resolution for this. Now, I'm going to make a motion, but I promised Aaron last night at the association meeting that we would allow opportunity for the public to talk prior to us casting our vote or having a discussion here. So my motion is that we revert back to the 12,500 pound cutoff for landing fees. as it was prior to last year, and that we have the assessed rate be a flat $2.20 per 1,000 pounds. And we would also have exemptions for military aircraft, antique and classic aircraft manufactured before 1955. Aircraft operating for heavy maintenance operations could be exempted with the discretion of the director. And aircraft involved in charitable activities such as angel flight, animal rescue, and such may be exempted again at the discretion of the director. What I am going to leave out of this is, since I happen to know that the Forest Service is already planning on putting in the temporary tower contracted 2 weeks at a time this summer, I'm going to leave out that part, but I think that the director has that discretion anyway. But that's the motion that I make.
We can call for second.
Second.
Discussion. And actually, let's have some discussion. Let's open for public comment before I call the vote. We'll discuss first, then I will entertain public comment before.
And again, what this is meant to be is that we pass this motion, that this again is a recommendation to be forwarded to the county commissioners for their ultimate decision.
So discussion. Board. Questions?
I guess I'll throw out, are we comfortable with the comparisons? Should we? That was the complaint from the last time we looked at this, is that we took some unique airports with the new airports. Do we feel comfortable with the comparisons are adequate?
I feel comfortable if, he had listed all the Northwest airports here that the Forest Service flies out of. And of those, we're by far the highest grade. And we understood from the Forest Service people that we're the highest grade in the country for landing fees. So given the alternatives that were shown, I believe that we're in a place where we're collecting a reasonable fee. Now, as Aaron pointed out last night, we're going to forego some revenue that we would have from captive customers like the hard flight people and some of the people that come in here at night that have something under 12,500 pounds. But I believe that we more than offset whatever loss there is associated with that by assuring us that we keep the Forest Service based here and operating and paying the landing fees that they're paying. That's my belief.
I have a question. So when the threshold was changed from 12,500 pounds, was there also a change in the landing fee?
Yes.
What per pound?
Yeah.
Per 1,000 pounds.
Yes.
I wasn't here when it was.
Okay, so that's my question, because I believe it's simply reverting back to what we had and add inflation onto it. That's the simplest solution to this problem.
That's a reasonable.
So does that $2.20 take into consideration what it was? And when did that take place?
Frank is the authority on that.
What we tried to do was look at airports within a reasonable radius of the circuit. To get an idea of what they were charging and try to come up with average market cost. We really don't want to be the cheapest airport. I know Phil and I talked about with some of these southern Idaho airports, $1.50, $1.60,000. Then you go over to Missoula, they're $2.48, you go to Phillips, they're $2.10, you go out to Moses, they're $1. The rates are they're all over the place. But realistically, what we want to do, we want to be in that market, we want to establish a rate that's fair to Fort Lane Airport, yet it keeps us competitive. So we don't have the Forest Service saying, we can take that B-8146 side out of Boise and fight cars cheaper from down there than we can from up here. And we want to have a very constant presence between them and Don and Sierra and other units. So in a sense, it's very subjective when this gets to the county commissioners. We used to look at it and say, well, I don't think 220 is fair. I think it should be more like 235, maybe 250. And I defer to that. But one thing is for certain, when Phil sat down with Forest Service and got told, well, your rates are high, he said, how high are they? He said you're the highest in the country. You know, that's a clarion call. You know, it's nice to make money, you know, off of those enterprises, but again, we should not want to be the highest rate that they pay anywhere else in the country, and that's pretty much the argument we're making, is get them back to a reasonable level. You know, Aaron made a comment about, you know, what was it, art fights and whatnot. I would presume that if we wanted to, we can charge whatever we want to whomever we want in terms of, you know, we would not exempt them from escaping the fees altogether. That's something that's beyond my ability to craft at this point, but I am saying they are all over the place. We do have a lot of variability. It's just that right now we are the highest in the land. I don't think we want to be that any longer in the country.
So let's finish the discussion on the board before we take public comment. Any other questions, discussion?
Just maybe to finish up a couple, I do agree. I mean, when you look at it, if we're double. In a lot of cases, what others are, we're probably out of line. I do think that the 12,500 pounds, that, you know, looking at. Just going online and looking at some of the cutoffs, that makes sense to me as well. Below that are the smaller planes, and that it seemed pretty consistent. I was wondering, I didn't have time to go in and look at the budget. I was curious how much of the budget. And I don't know if anybody knows this, that for the airport that we're getting the landing fees. Bill, do you know approximately what on an annual basis what we're getting for our landing fees?
No, I don't.
Total.
Kim and I have discussed this, and I'll just tell you how. Everything that was discussed, basically I agreed with, except we were looking at code 5 and above was the old industry standard. That's why we used it originally. Now, in the research we've done, not in depth, but I heard a lot of airports in the Northwest region. And the trend anymore is 10,000 and above. So we were looking at basically the same thing, was saying, okay, 10.5 and above, exempt after prior 55, and cutting the 240 in half to the 440 in half makes sense to me when you look at the other airports and their freight rates and what they have to offer freighters. They don't have a freight rate. And I'm sorry, if we want to grow and attract that kind of business in here, and we're starting out way up here, it seems a little ridiculous to me, the outfit that, and UPS and FedEx have talked to us in the years past. They keep an eye on the growth, what's going on here. Our biggest problem for not having a FedEx other than a repair station here, and according to UPS, if Hutter bypass goes through and Atlantic Casper 5 lane to 95, they'd have moved in here years ago. That was ground transportation was our holdback. But now we jump from those days, and they update to look at us, and also they're going 440 per 1,000. Are we trying to attract that business in here or drive it away? If we don't want freighters coming in here, we should stay there. If we don't, probably the Forest Service that they have, it's not really their problem, except it is. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, the contractors don't have to come here. The contract aircraft, if they want to, if it's too high here, we're gonna go to LeGrand, or we're gonna go to Boise, or we'll go back to Missoula rather than stay here. It's the contractors are upset enough at what happened here that they're going, we're gonna rethink how we handle our aircraft for you guys. Personally, I think that's kind of a shame, but again, the 440 is great if we had something to offer and we can work up to that. But I agree with the 220. It's just that the 10,000 and above is kind of where we reason to that, because that's where the industry standard seems to be adjusting anymore.
I think with the information that we had, the number is probably reasonable. I think we need to do something. I was just curious. Total budget for the airport, how much we're bringing in landing fees, but if you don't have that, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was gonna try and look at the county budget. That also it's about.
That's fees collected on the exception of the fee structure. So if we change it to 205, we had had a 205 for last year, that's.
We would have given up how much? 15,000.
All right, so we're not, it's not.
That comes back to you.
Okay.
Sure.
I'm-
So if there's
well, pass.
nobody else has discussion or questions on the board, I actually want to just chime in, but anybody else? Okay, so a couple questions I had were along the lines of the revenue stream generated by each weight class in the current classification scheme. I also think that part of that weight classification scheme and pricing that goes up according to each weight class is something that there's an element in here in terms of what kind of community do you want to live in? Do you want lots more cargo planes being attracted here to this airport? Do people living around here want that? And that's the perspective I bring. I can't just glance those numbers and just grasp it offhand, Frank, but I tend to think if you lower prices, more people come. That's not a bad thing, but the bigger the planes that are coming in, the more disturbance there is to the people that live around here. So there's gotta be a balance, right?
Brian, can I make a comment on to that?
Real quick, just- yeah.
Okay.
So that's a perspective that I just wanted to share. Maybe the premise of it is wrong, but it is something that I've given some thought to. The other thing is, don't take from that comment though, that like an essential emergency service like the Forest Service firefighting tankers coming in. I agree with you on that, like some accommodation needs to be made, particularly with the towers that they're providing under this new kind of scheme. I also agree with the little guy in the, kind of the Mr. Pemberton type classic aircraft. I think that's a good thing. But where it gets into the greater weight classes, the flight path that they're following, if you're attracting more by lowering the price, there's a balance to be struck there, and I think that needs to be taken into consideration in this. So, Mike,
Well, that has never been a problem in the past. That's all I'll say with that.
you live in Athol?
Not here, but I'm down here. I've been here since '05. So I'm very in tune with what goes on here at the airport, and I've never seen the thought of the airport being a magnet for large aircraft because you're lowering the fee. The fee was lower in the past.
Yeah,
That's why my question, what was it? We don't know, but it probably was significantly less. So maybe we need to do a little bit of due diligence and find out what that was. But it's never been a problem to my knowledge.
I think I understand your point now, which is simply like it's in the past, it might not have been as high as even if we cut this in half, but you're saying you've never seen it anecdotally just attract more air traffic in the heavier weight class.
So I think the greater concern or threat would be allowing commercial aircraft, commercial transportation. There. I mean, that would be, if you're gonna look at a threat to the well-being of the surrounding community, I think that would be a greater threat than a landing fee issue.
Do you mean passenger or?
Yeah, passengers. Yeah.
I think Karen had a question and maybe the.
So if there are no more questions, discussion on the board, I'd open it to some public comment here before we
Just
proceed.
my personal anecdotal experience, fuel price typically drives where someone wants to land more than the landing fee.
True.
All right, entertain public comments. I think
Okay.
it's been what you said.
Going back, I would do your due diligence and make sure that you understand going from the 8,000 to the 12,500 or 10,000, as Phil suggests. What revenues you're gonna lose, because you're talking about trying to privately own and fund an AWAS system. And that's where those monies are gonna come from, as well as, upping everybody's lease rates and everything else to try to pay for those systems, so. It's already in place. I pay those fees all over the United States, Canada, Mexico, wherever we go. $30 here or there. The reason the numbers jump up so high exponentially is because we get maybe one BBJ or two large category aircraft here on occasion, and it costs more airport facilities and they need air stairs and looked after and all the other stuff. That's why those numbers are set that high. So, but, you know, in this grand scheme of things, everybody pays infrastructure or landing fees everywhere they go. You're gonna do what you bought with them.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Yeah, I'd like to say that, yeah, I'd like to say that, Coeur d'Alene Airport has really gotten a bad reputation for high prices, especially on the landing fees. And when you take that away, then you don't get fuel flowage rates of 9 cents a gallon, and you don't get people coming in here. And so they, you know, they say, oh, well, we gotta go buy more. No, you don't stop at Coeur d'Alene, it's too expensive. So that's my comment.
Any other public comment? Sir.
More of a question, what? How did we actually come up with this 440,000 number? What cost we're actually, I guess, put forward to the point where now we can just cut them in half?
Joan could probably answer that question, probably in the vet position.
Just a quick summary. I'm not looking for details. So,
Standard question.
so how did we arrive at the 440,000 number for the landing fee? In the idea of now we can take and cut that fee in half. So what costs were associated to even come with that number? Usually, you know, there's some sort of fixed cost that's associated with something.
There was a study done.
There was a study done and being that Coeur d'Alene is a resort destination, one of the areas that we looked at was Sun Valley, and Sun Valley is incredibly expensive. And so some of those numbers were factored into Sun Valley billings. We don't necessarily compete with Geiger because they do commercial airline service. But those numbers were all factored in, and it was then an amalgamation of you know, finding the sweet spot in there. That's how it was done.
So
Yeah,
I
if-
think the biggest issue was that maybe we didn't have some of the exclusions for some classes of aircraft, such as firefighters, et cetera.
Well, but the airport director, we left that in there specifically so that he could waive it at any chance and any time.
Yeah, that is true.
Anyway, to answer your question, sir, I think the bottom line is there was no empirical study done that says, look at the cost of wear and tear on the runway and what it's actually costing us for that. It was looking at some other high cost regional things and using a subjective thing.
So I'm gonna come in here because you got a motion that's pending. We're having a discussion. We've got some public comment on it. I get the gist of what your points are. Public comment, we usually don't answer questions, but I get it. So one of the things that I think is needed, Frank has done yeoman work here, as has Mike putting information together, but it sounds like an analysis, more focused analysis of like how to, you know, come up with this, something to put forward as a recommendation. It's either what you've got on the table, or one thing that I would entertain as a recommendation that you know, some direction be given by the BOCC to the airport director to look at fees. You know, that's an alternate way to get at this so that we have more data that's driving recommendation.
So I would think that I would keep the motion as it is, and the recommendation would be what it is, understanding that the county commissioners are going to put those questions to the airport director. And if he's got additional input, if he wants to support the 10,000 pound deal versus the 12,500, it's their ultimate authority to make that decision. And we've at least taken this out of our hands and put it in their hands and said, we'd like to see something done. We've given a recommendation. Bill is going to make his points to the county commissioners, and then ultimately something is going to happen. So I would keep the motion just as it is.
So for the purposes of just capturing the essence of that, do you mind just once again stating it out loud?
Okay, to revert back to the 12,500 pound threshold for landing fees at a rate of $2.20 per 1,000 pounds, with exemptions for military aircraft, antique and classic aircraft manufactured before 55. Aircraft operating for heavy maintenance operations can be exempted by the director. Aircraft brought to KCOE for display and air shows can be exempted by the director. And aircraft involved in charitable activities such as angel flight, animal rescue, or emergency situations can be exempted by the airport director.
We have a second on that. Thank you for restating that. We already have a second. I'm gonna call for the vote. Let's all say aye. Who's in favor?
I,
Any nays? Looks like the ayes carry on this recommendation on the item 11.
and I would move at this point, Mr. Chairman, that we've taken more than the half hour that I asked for here, and folks have stuck around, and that we table items.
12 through. We just mentioned 11,
Right,
Yep, 12, 13,
yes,
right?
12 through 16.
but that we allow one final open comment for the public before you leave.
I second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, the ayes carry, so. Let's have public comment and then we're gonna adjourn.
Could I clarify one thing, Brad? I may
No.
be, I may be the interim director, but as a county employee.
Yeah.
I have the ability to request of the Board of County Commissioners to waive fees, because as a county employee, I cannot. They can only be waived by BOCC, unless they want to change that, but you have to ask my boss.
I understand, and thank you. So is there any other public comment that would be offered? This time, if you could just state your name this time. because
Name's Brian Fox.
Kim's gonna hate it when she goes to. So,
I'm a former city councilman, vice mayor of some other place.
okay,
And I do have a background in aviation and sorry, stirring the pot. So, if I may, to just have a comment, may I make a suggestion that maybe we can put to the BOCC as far as doing a possible rate study, not a comparative study, but an actual cost study related to the landing fees, and that may clarify some things on how this may look in the future, as far as maybe making this a little bit more friendly place to fly into.
And I think we're fortunate enough to have one of the county commissioners here with us tonight, and he hears your comment, so.
Thank you.
He wants to.
Perfectly aware of that.
thank you. And,
I was just gonna make a quick comment that kind of goes along with that, is that I voted in favor of moving it forward, in that I felt some urgency in that it looks like our fees are higher than they should be. But the cost and how it fits in with the budget is a bigger issue that I don't feel like we can answer or take on here, and that's gonna go on. So I just wanted to clarify that.
I agree with, there are other information points that should be considered, but I think the recommendations there and the BOCC representatives here to hear it. And subject to that, is there any other public comment? If there's none, I would move to adjourn for the evening, and thank you for sticking it out with us for an extra half hour. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. In favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Thank you all for your attendance.
It's